Hello, welcome to the talking series, the Blue Mic talking series, which is hosted by me, Shaji Prabhakaran. I am really blessed to have today my great friend Tom Byer, who is a global uh, celebrity as far as football expertise is concerned. Great to have Tom today. He is the first guest for the Blue Mic Talking series, and just give me a bit of introduction, and it won't be enough, but still, he's a former professional player who played in USA, then England, and then in Japan, and he's finally settled in Japan for last 40 years, and he's a personality in global football who initiated the youth football training program way back in 1989 in Japan, and then he started football academies. T3 worked with different uh, countries in Asia, and then he was also part of the longest TV series promoting football among the youth in Japan, and then he is part of also many programs, many projects across the globe, and he is one of the great proponent of football, new football concept promoted by him. Football starts at home, and he is greatly promoting, and he is working with many countries, and his experiences, his wisdom, and his expertise will be of great value to those who are going to listen to our conversations today. And I'm greatly honored to have Tom Byer today in my show, the Top Blue Mic Talking Series. Welcome, Tom. Happy to have you. It's a great pleasure. And over to you for the introduction and to say something as part of the opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Shaji. It's an absolute honor to be on your show, let alone be the first guest. So there's a lot of pressure on me here. But anyway, it's great to chat with you. We have been friends for several years. You have done so much for football, not just in India, but around our confederation. Because I know that you've been on these endless amounts of committees trying to help improve football, not just in India, but in other countries around the world, and even working with FIFA and all the big organizations. So it's a pleasure for me to be on here speaking about football. I'm here in my living room of my home, which is Tokyo. As you alluded to, I've been in Japan. It's coming up on 40 years now. I've been here. So I've been here a long time. We're going through an absolute heat wave, which is probably just a normal day in India, but it's like a 40 degrees every single day here. So hot, but at least I'm indoors. I've got my air conditioner on, and I'm ready for a very robust conversation about anything football.
Thank you, Tom, for your lovely introduction and for your kind words. It's absolutely once again my great pleasure to have you today. To take forward our conversation, I would like to ask you, like, how it is like you are living in Asia, especially in Japan, for 40 years, living America, and like you have seen the transition of Japan football in last 40 years, and at the same time you have also seen how football is gaining popularity in your country, that's USA. So therefore, in contrast, what you have to say on both US as well as Japan?
Yeah, well, great way to start off the show. Yes, I'm originally from the United States. I was born in New York City. And then my family moved upstate into the countryside. I stayed in America through to my college years, which was in the mid 1980s. To date myself, I'm an old guy. And that was not a good period of or time for an American to be aspiring to be a professional, because our professional league, called the North American Soccer League, had just folded. It went under, it collapsed, it went bankrupt. So there was really no serious professional football going on in those years. And again, I'll give you the long story short. I did make my way over to Japan in the mid 1980s, and I was very fortunate. I played for Hitachi, which is in the J League now, but I played in the old JFL, which is the Japan Football League. And so I played at Hitachi. I was the first foreigner to be there. I was the first American in Japan. A good buddy of mine, Dan Kalichman, was the second one who played for Sanfrecce in the J League. I never played J League because there was no J League. I finished playing in 1988, and then the J League started in 1993. So in the U.S., very similar to, I mean, there was no professional league going on, and then the MLS came about. But they're so different in so many different ways. First of all, in Japan, we have a very robust promotion, relegation, 3-tier system, J1, J2, J3, and then a healthy system under that too, JFL 1-2 as well. And so there's promotion, relegation. It's very competitive. We have 60 teams that play throughout the country. In the MLS, it's a very what they call closed entity league. There's no promotion. There's no relegation. It's franchise business, which is constantly under a huge amount of criticism by many people in the U.S. because of the franchise structure. But it was modeled after the other professional sports leagues that are all franchise. And so there's a lot of differences in it, but probably if you want to talk about the performance side, a lot of people ask me, well, which is better, the U.S. national team, which developmental program? I think hands down, Japan is ahead of the United States when it comes to national teams, when it comes to youth development. And here's the reason why. If you look at the players that play on the U.S. national team, and we're talking about the men's side, the women's are a completely different conversation. But on the men's side, a majority of the players that are playing, that are the top players, are playing in European clubs. The level between the American boys that are playing in Europe and the American boys that are playing in the MLS, the gap is quite big. There's a huge gap. Now, talk about Japan. Our boys who are playing in the top leagues in Europe and the Japanese players playing in the J League, the gap between the best and the least developed is much more tinier. So it's and that's really at the heart of my coaching or my developmental philosophy, and that is, if you can close the gap between regardless of the ages, but actually the very young ages, if you can close the gap between the very best players and the lesser developed players, that's when your elite player pool bursts. And we see that. That's what's happening in Japan right now. The elite player pool is huge. So there's a constant line of players that are coming through. I can't even keep up with it, and I live here. But every tournament, there's new stars that are born. We've got this, I can't remember, I heard recently there's over 150 Japanese players that are playing in Europe alone. And so, or I might be off, but it's close to 100 at least. But the reality is that we didn't used to have this explosion of players over in Europe, but we do now. So Japanese players are some of the most really kind of sought after players in the world right now. Even in America, we've got several hundred Japanese players playing at universities in the United States too, under scholarships. So yeah, it's a big difference. And I've seen the transition remarkably from when I first came here in the mid 1980s, where this is interesting. Even when I came in the 80s and I played, we had some really, really great players. I would challenge just as good as they are today. The difference is we had fewer of them, whereas today we have tons. And that's the difference. When you reach that tipping point, where in many countries, like perhaps I would say even in India, and I've been to India several times, but even in America, some of these countries, they know where the good players are. Someone can drive you. We know where to go to find the good players. Like here in Japan, they're just everywhere. It's, you just show up to a game on a weekend with, kids between the ages of 6 and 12. And it's just very, very healthy here. So that's just kind of a little bit of my thoughts on the difference between the U.S. and Japan. The women's are much different. The American women's have until now enjoyed a very high status of being number one in the world, but that is quickly being eroded, quickly. And the reason I believe is because, first of all, America was probably the first country in the world to really promote women's football, and a lot of it has to do with culture and social elements as well, because we have some laws on the books in America that if the government gives funding to a specific university for a men's sport, they have to equal the amount of spending that they'll spend on a women's sport. I think it's called Title IX or Title 11. Yeah, Title IX, I think it is. And so that was a big head start because universities could receive funding if they took up women's football, which they did. So the U.S. got a tremendous head start to the rest of the world. But here's where I think we've got America has some problems. The Europeans have finally decided let's go into football for women, right? But what's really what's important to understand is that those are already existing football cultures. They're football cultures. So young girls now in the UK, in Holland, in Spain, in Italy, in Germany, in Belgium, they're basically exposed and marinated in a football culture 24/7. On the weekends, they're sitting around the dining room table and they're having dinner or lunch, and people are watching football. They're talking about it. So they've got the perfect storm. So, it's not enough today to only play football. You have to watch it. You have to study it. You have to understand the systems, the formations, the tactics. And this is where the Europeans, and I think the South Americans as well, have taken this giant leap forward when it comes to women's football. And we're seeing it already because we're seeing the domination. I think the last World Cup, aside from the U.S., I think every team was from Europe that makes it to at least into the final, 4, 8, 16. It's incredibly dominated by Europeans. So that's my intro and at least some of my beliefs when it comes to America.
Thank you, Tom. Great insights on both Japan as well as USA, and nobody else have seen the transformation what Japan has gone through in last 40 years. You've been witness to that, and your experience seeing that transformation definitely can add a lot of value to many countries in Asia, because Japan is a really an inspiring story, and they won the Women's World Cup where nobody was even thinking that time, and that is why they are well ahead of many Asian countries. Now, coming back to your very dear aspect of you kind of promote every second, and that is the grassroots part of football, where if you see in America, the participation at the grassroots level in soccer is very big. Yeah,
Yes.
and in Japan, again, the structure is far different from the US model, where so what the contrast you see in both these countries, and as far as the talent development is concerned, Japan is more successful right now, considering the number of players playing outside Japan top leagues and the performances are concerned. But then the grassroots is where the real energy one can see. And what is the structure like, and in terms of the stakeholder participation, and the numbers and the way forward, the pathway, and its strength. So, what you can, in brief, share about what you have experienced in both these countries?
Sure. Well, they are, again, a very stark difference between the developmental models and grassroots models between Japan and the US. We'll start with America first. America, and it's a very big criticism that's always being lodged at them, that in America, we have what's called a pay to play model. You must pay money to join a team. And I'm not talking just a couple of dollars. I'm talking big money, huge amounts of money. It could cost anywhere from 5,000 US dollars to $8,000 to $10,000 a year to play on a really good team. And so that's a huge difference because it cuts out a majority of children in America. And we all know through football globally that more often than not, the most creative players are the ones that come from the disadvantaged, underserved parts of society and culture, unfortunately, where players are in Latin American countries or in European countries, where a typical young child will either be motivated by inspiration or desperation. Inspiration because of the star players that they've grown up in their culture worshiping through their whole family for generations, or that desperation to try to fight your way out of poverty and identifying as football as a way and a means to raise your status in society. So in America, to cut to the chase, rich kids play football or soccer in America. So that's a huge barrier for the U.S. And there's many reasons to that why, but contrasted with Japan, where there's a very low barrier to enter into football teams here, and it costs very little to nothing. Maybe the cost of your uniform. And I'm sitting in my living room in Tokyo right now. So right now, I'm pointing out this window. If I actually get up and look out the window, I can see my son's elementary school. So from first grade to sixth grade, that's where he went to school. It's right out the window here. If I point my arm here, that's the junior high school where my kids went. Okay. So, and that's where they play football. Now, it just so happens I live between both of the schools, but here's the point. The point is that all of the football development here in Japan, first of all, it's first grade to sixth grade. So from 6 to 12 years of age, that's the elementary school. Then 13, 14, 15 is the junior high school. Those are not clubs that are operated by the schools. They're nonprofit organizations that use the school's grounds to train and practice and play games for free, zero. The only cost is the uniform, and if there's a little transportation to go from one train station to the next play. The other big stark difference between the two is that Japan, there's no on-off season for football playing here. It goes 12 months a year. You join a team, and the school calendar goes from April to March. In America, the school calendar goes from September to June. So here in Japan, they overtrain. But there's two things. The plus is that we develop very good technical players because technical skill development, it takes a ridiculous amount of time to practice to become good through repetition. So the Japanese practice a lot, so they get a lot of repetition. The downside is there is a lot of injuries. There's some burnout here because kids play too much. In America, it's seasonal depending upon where you live. So more often than not, you'll find like top players are coming from the climates that are conducive to football all year. California, Texas, Florida, North, South Carolina, Georgia, been around those areas because they can play all year long. So there's big differences in the developmental models. Here in Japan, there's specialization. And that's just because once you join a football team, you can't play baseball. If you join a baseball team, you can't play football because it goes all year. It's all year. It's not like you just go and play 3-4 months a year and then you change seasons. In America, although I heard it's changed a lot, for America has always been a multi-sport culture. Basketball, like when I grew up in the fall, which is considered September, October, November, that was the time of year where you played American football, you played soccer, and you ran cross country. Okay. In the winter time, you play volleyball, wrestling, and basketball. In the spring, you play baseball and you play track and field. And then in the summertime, which is a very long time off, June, July, August, almost 3 months, you could be playing other sports, going to camps. So it's a big difference in the culture. And for me, as you know, Shaji, I'm a culture warrior. I believe that culture is driving a lot of development when it comes to football. And when we say culture, what is culture? My definition of culture is when a club, a community, a family, a state, a country shares the same common beliefs and values. Okay. They accept as a kind of a collective group that this is the way life is. And so I think that in culture, if you look at the countries that develop the best players in the world, they don't necessarily have the best coaches. They don't necessarily have the most educated coaches. They don't necessarily have the best curriculums or elite player pathways or facilities. What I find many of them have is a tremendous head start. They start as early as they can start walking to have a ball at their feet. But even that's not enough, because we know now also as well, at least I preach, that kicking shouldn't be the first technique that you teach. It should be more about ball mastery and ball control. And this will happen naturally in a football culture where, especially in Latin countries, fathers in particular will use football as a tool to bond with their kids. So there's a lot of, close, intra-family connecting play. It's tantamount to what we call deliberate, intentional, specific practice, which is deep learning, but it's disguised as playtime. And so, anyway, sorry, I don't want to get off on the wrong tangent here, but yeah, that's a big difference in football development. So it's very cheap and very affordable here. In America, it's a pay-to-play model. A lot of the coaches that are coaching in the United States will be kind of semi-pro type of guys that are getting paid money to do it. Here, unless you're at a J League club, most of the coaches for under 12, I'd say 90%, 95% are all volunteer parents, fathers. So, that's the reality of football here but we develop better players technically. And, and people might say, well, there's this big confusion about how we develop, but we can maybe save that for another corner when we finish here. But I've got some strong opinions about football development and the role that culture plays.
Thank you, Tom, for that wonderful insights and the contrast what you presented based on your experiences, what you have experienced in both these countries, and the culture, as you mentioned, plays an important role, and the structure and the mindset, and then again the whole ecosystem, how they come together to reach to a common goal,
Yeah.
and that is where the contrast one can see. And now, as we have talked about the grassroots, now moving to the talent development aspect, and uh, how different the Japan is, because you are I'll not like to go through the contrast between USA, but then Japan and other prominent countries in world football. You have experienced many countries in Europe, and I am not going to the South American side. It's a totally different ball game there. But how it is structured from the scouting to the talent development and the whole talent development ecosystem, how it operates, how it is structured, and how the J League clubs and the football ecosystem coming together, like in the talent development space.
Yeah, good question. Well, here in Japan, as everyone knows, it's an island country surrounded by just water. So this is a country that it shares a very close, or the collaborative spirit. Culture is extremely strong. I know you've been to Japan. You've got lots of Japanese colleagues as well. But it's very easy to get everybody moving in the same direction. Okay, first of all. So the beliefs and the values are very similar. And so it's not difficult to find where the good players are here. The JFA, which is, and this is a big difference in the United States too, big major difference I didn't even talk about. In America, youth football or soccer is divided up amongst several different organizations. There's not just one. And that's probably the biggest uh, obstacle to America is that you've got US soccer and then you have a whole host of other youth organizations that are all competing against each other, trying to kill each other off. They're fighting for the same players, they're fighting for the same coaches, they're fighting for the same sponsors, they're fighting for the same grounds to use, everything. Here in Japan, you have the JFA, then you have 47 state associations. Each state association then has different local federations as well, and they work very close together. The first time that you will be identified by Japan's training center will be at the age of 10. Okay, all of the local areas have an under 10 training center. What that means is the coaches of the team will nominate, let's say, 3 or 4 players for their team to go to the tryout for the local area. So, give you an idea, here in Japan, I'm sorry, yeah, here in my area here, so we've got 47 states. Tokyo has 23 different municipalities, 23 different ones. So in that 23, like I live in a one called Setagaya-ku. It's a ward, it's called, right? Well, there's 23 of them. Well, we've got tons of clubs in this area here. So we would send our best players from each club to the Setagaya training center, and then they will be selected. And then once they're selected, they will train or have some specialized training a couple of times, a month or a season or quarter. So that's where it first starts, right there. Now, the thing with Japan is that we've got so many good players here. Yes, some do sometimes slip through the grate. And then also the first time that a J League club will organize the youngest age group is also at the age of 10. So it's fourth grade. So then it just climbs up and it just gets, bigger and it falls under a different umbrella. And then you've got the local municipality, the Setagaya Training Center. Then you'll have the Tokyo Training Center. Then you'll have the regional training center. Then you'll have the national training center. So it's a very well organized, disciplined organization, which many countries would struggle to put in place, to be honest with you. And that's just a lot to do with the culture as well and how organized Japan is, how disciplined Japan is. And I think that is probably the strength of the Japanese culture.
Oh, Tom, that's real big contrast what you have presented, what US has got in terms of the football structure from the grassroots to the youth, and how Japan works in a very collaborative way, where every organ of the football ecosystem are working in one direction, one line, and that's where the fruits we can see. They are able to produce consistently at the top. And now, moving from sticking to the talent development side, as you said, the J League also gets involved from the start at the age of 10. But like when the the players move to the part of excellence. What I say is that the elite model, where the superior talents are, bucketed together, and how that structure works, like at what age, whether the club directly, the J League operates a residential academy, or they still, the talented boys and girls, they come from home and they train and then they go back, or do they have all of them have got academies, residential center of excellences, till what age, from where to when, and then and also it's not only about the players. When we talk about excellence, it's about the whole ecosystem, in terms of the facilities, the sports science, then the whole support system in terms of the having the right kind of coaches, the elite coaches, elite youth coaches, and then the whole sports science aspects, and then the competitive landscape, which is very important. How that elite players can come out of a system where all the parameters are there and all aspects are there and is functioning optimally, and that's where the players comes out of that pipeline.
Yeah. Well, if we stick again with the beginning stage, which is the under 12s, it's a very robust. We've got over 8,000 teams here in Japan that participate in the national tournament. We have a national tournament. Every single stage or phase of development has an annual national tournament. So there will be a national champion at every age group, under 12, under 15, under 18. Okay. So that's very important. And it's very structured, and they're very separated. They're completely different organizations that they fall under the JFA, but they're a host of just different groups of people as well. So after the and then they've got broken up into, as I told you, the 47 states, but then we have 8 regional JFA training NTCs, national training centers, where the best of the best will gather a few times a year, and they will play competition. They'll have training. They will interact with the national training staff from the JFA. I've worked at all 8 of those all of those training centers over the years as a technical specialist. So I'm not just talking about it. I've actually worked in it. I've seen it. I see how it operates. And then one of the big problems here in Japan is that once you leave the under 12s, there's only 2 options for you. The very best of the best will go to the J League, and then the next in under 12 football, you've got thousands of club teams that are using school grounds to practice at, but they're not part of the school program, if that makes sense. Okay. When you go to junior high school from the age of 13, so we've got 6 years of elementary school, 3 years of junior high, 3 years of high school. Once you join a junior high school, you join what's called the Bukatsu. Bukatsu is a club team that is operated and managed by the school. Okay. Bukatsu is in junior high and it's in high school. It's a major shift from the under 12s. And there's a huge drop-off rate of kids that drop out of playing football and all sports after the under 12s because the school system is so competitive, entrance exams, things like that. So they have a major drop-off once you join junior high school. The best of the best might go into J League. There are some private club teams, but very few. For the most part, you play for your school team. And that's where things go a little bit kind of sideways here in Japan. That's Japan. If you talk to anybody in the JFA or J League, Japan's Achilles heel is junior high school. It's their football program there. Now, then after junior high school, they go into these high school teams that are very, very specializing in football. They are so famous brands for football development, and they go into those programs because that culminates in the All Japan High School Tournament that's over a 100-year history that can usually fill up the national stadium with 50,000 people to come and watch it. So then from there, so these are the pathways. So you've got 2 pathways. You can go into a J League club when you're very young and work your way up, or you can go to some of these special high schools and work your way up. or you can even go to some of the universities. There's still legitimate pathways for going into football development. So, the J League has done a good job, but they do not dominate development by any means here. A lot of the high schools still develop good players. A lot of the universities develop good players. But the good news is that it's a very healthy ecosystem, and it's very hard to if you it, let's put it this way. It's hard to fall through the grades, although sometimes it does happen. Sometimes there are some players that don't get identified. Like, for example, we've got hundreds of Japanese players playing throughout all of Asia, even in India, Indonesia, and I've never even heard of some of these guys. They didn't have big J League careers here, but again, that just goes to show you the depth of the Japanese players and the amount of players that we have, the quality of players that couldn't make it in the J League, and they're playing in all the different Asian leagues all around the country, if not all around the world. They're everywhere. I had heard something recently that there's over 400 or 500 Japanese students playing in college and universities in the United States right now. So that's an explosion. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there's so much that goes into it in Japan because it's a very, very large organization that is pretty well managed well, but it's a huge organization here from your local club team to your local association to your state association, and then to the JFA, and then the 8 regional training centers, and then
Uh,
60 J League clubs as well.
Yes. Yeah, I think based on what you have shared, if we kind of analyze the situation, it is the culture that binds all these different organizations coming together. Otherwise, in some culture, everything will explode to different direction. But
Yes.
then it is Japan where the responsibilities and the accountabilities are such ingrained in the culture, and that way everyone works with one purpose of that to see the players come out of the system, though they are not interconnected structurally that way, and that's the beauty of Japan, and that is where they are successful, and it would be very difficult to replicate that model unless you have the similar kind of mindset and culture. That's very, very true. If we go deeper into analyzing, and that is where it stands out, is very different, uh, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. And up until now, we're talking about what's happening in Japan at what I call the traditional level: football, clubs, elite player development. Where does club football take place? How does it take place? Who does it? But then we have something that's really unique to Japan as well, and that is that we've got some commercial football schools that have been hugely popular. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I was heavily involved even on that side of it. Is that in 1993, I basically led the charge to create a movement here in Japan that was focused on technical skill development. And at first we started, and the reason that it was started was because I saw an opportunity after I got done playing here that kids needed to focus more on technical skill development. And what do I mean? Football development is a hit or a miss, depending upon where you live, will depend upon the quality of the coaching you have. Now, at the traditional sense, everybody believes that football development happens only between a coach and a player. Okay. But what we've seen here now is that we set up these schools here in Japan back in the early 1990s, only a couple of them. I came up with the idea, and I basically set these schools up that did not function as club teams, because here in club teams from 6 to 12, usually the rhythm is you'll train 2 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, maybe 3, and then on a weekend you'll play. So there's a lot of space there that kids aren't playing football. So I saw an opportunity And so we started a couple of these technical schools where Monday to Friday, under 6, under 8, under 10, under 12, kids could come to our schools. They would only get technical training. That's all they do. Focus on ball mastery, technical skill, feint, stop, start, change of direction, 1v1s, mini games. That was it. And then they go home. And they would come once or twice a week. And we wouldn't function as a club team. On the weekend, we didn't work. They went to their club teams and they played. Well, this caught on and it became hugely successful, both as a commercial business and also as a huge, huge developmental pathway for Japan's players. So now, what we did back in 1993, fast forward 31 years now, we've got over 150 of these schools that still remain in Japan. At any given time, there's about 20,000 players are in that. And we've got now, we can see the link between those schools and the journey from grassroots to national teams. How do I say that? The captain of the Japan national team, Endo Wataru, comes from our schools. He's a central midfielder for Liverpool. Okay? We've got Takumi Minamino, comes from our schools. Ritsu Doan comes from our schools. Ayase Ueda comes from us. So we see now that this, and if you go, even to people like the former JFA chairman, who I know is your friend too, Kozo Tajima, he will credit these schools as a massive, massive plus for football development here. And so you've got that element of it as well. Again, I'm talking about things that personally I can talk about because I was involved in it, being casted on Japan's #1 TV show for children for over 14 years, every weekday morning, highlighting the importance of ball mastery, technical skill development, 1v1, appearing in Japan's #1 comic book, creating content, DVDs, VHS videos. Today, that would be apps, doing events. It's all mixed in. But unfortunately, it's misunderstood. Grassroots football is the most misunderstood part of football because it's always viewed as more of an obligation rather than the opportunity. So here in Japan, even, if you get a presentation from the JFA, they will give you a completely different perspective of why Japan's so good because they'll do it from a centrist point of view. Well, we're the JFA. We have 47 prefectures. We all have training centers. We have 8 national training centers. We have the JFA Academy. Boom, 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 boom. If you go to the J League, they'll tell you the same. We've got promotion relegation, 3-tiered system, 60 clubs. We've got trained coaches. We've got boom, 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 boom. They don't talk about the commercial schools. They don't talk about the animation that we created. They don't talk about the pop culture of football, whether it's Captain Tsubasa or it's Inazuma 11. These are incredibly popular animated series that have been going on for decades here in Japan. Or they don't talk about the endless amount of football magazines that we have. At last count, I think there's about 30 of them. All of them carry technical skill development corners in them. You look at it, so everywhere you turn, it's technique, technique, technique. And if you think of what's the characteristic of Japanese players, they're very good technically. So this is the unknown part that's like kind of the silent development that's behind the curtain that most people don't know about. They don't know it. And again, why? It's culture. Culture accepts that when a little 6-year-old joins a football club, they're going to play all year round and they're going to train 4 times a week for 2-3 hours a day. That's culture. So there's certain things that are kind of hidden pathways here in Japan that are not understood, that if people did understood them, they might be able to add that as part of their collective way of how do you develop players. But they don't. They just think that when they come here, and we get them, as you know, I mean, people come from all over, whether it's India, they all come to Japan. They want to see what's happening. The JFA takes care of them, the J League, and you only get a one-dimensional what's happening there. And that's why I think, too, why I get so much contact around the world is because I've actually been in those trenches. I've actually been on TV. There's an animated caricature of myself that's became almost like a cult figure here in Japan because I was on television for so many years. So yeah, there's much more that goes into football development than just good coaching. That's the reality.
No, absolutely, absolutely, Tom. That's very, very evident as you have mention all those insights on various dimensions and the strengths what Japan has got. Now, let's move to your most favorite part, you are promoting, you are pioneering football starts at home,
Yeah.
which is a concept you are driving day in and out. How is going? What is the level of acceptance? What you have experienced so far, and what do you think? How this can be promoted more, so that every home where this becomes really integral part of child development, rather
Yes.
than to say that to produce a player. What you have to share your experiences on that, so that people who promote football, to people who talk about football, they understand and they start promoting this very aspect.
Yes, thanks for bringing this up. So, after all of I've been here in Japan for so many decades, heavily involved in football development at every single level, it wasn't until I had my own kids that I had a rethink about this topic called football starts at home. And really, simply to cut to the chase, the genesis of it was is that because I spent so much time as a technical specialist, I understood the importance of what we call ball mastery. Ball mastery is not new. Everybody gets it, they understand it, but there's a lot of components around ball mastery that was not understood. First of all, what's the best age to introduce football ball mastery? Also, what could be possible for a small child to do? And how can you actually facilitate that love of the ball? When you look at the strong football cultures of the world, those players didn't necessarily fall in love with playing football. A 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 year old does not fall in love with playing football. They fall in love with the ball. There's a major difference in that. There's a major difference. So when I started with my own children, I placed these little balls in around my home. And again, because I had a technical knowledge, I discouraged kicking. I just didn't. First of all, the home is very small area in most homes here in Tokyo. So I had a couple of these little balls, and when my boy would go to play with the ball, I would discourage it from kicking it, and I would model like just pulling the ball back with the right foot and the left foot. So then I started to see that my son was becoming very interested in the ball. The ball kind of became the favorite toy, and he would follow directions. And the most amazing thing was I couldn't believe how interested he became with the ball. But it wasn't so much because of the ball, it was because he wanted my attention. So now, fast forward, and I wrote this book called Football Starts at Home back in 2015. But the breakthrough was this. The breakthrough was is that I got contacted by a fellow by the name of Dr. John Rate. Dr. John Ratey from Harvard Medical School, who took an interest. He had heard about my work. It culminated in a phone call. I showed him some of the videos of my kids, and I just written the book with a football journalist, Fred Varco here, British football journalist, and we hadn't published it yet. So he asked to read the manuscript. So I sent it to him, and he loved the content so much, he wrote the foreword and the afterword for the book. Now, this guy, Shaji, is a rock star in neuroscience. He's written 12 books, millions and millions of copies sold. He's world renowned. So here now I've got this cutting edge, innovative neuroscientist from Harvard Medical School professor who writes 14 pages from my book. And why is that important? Is because he explains in detail the neuroscience, the child parent attachment, the early development of a child's brain. And then we started to learn and understand the importance of ball mastery, but in particular at the young ages. So, what's happening when a little child is trying to control an object with their feet, which is the ball, that becomes a mental task because you got to control it. You got to really focus. When you get that level of focus and a detail and concentration, that's when deep learning takes place. Okay. But more importantly, because you're trying to control the object with your feet, it becomes a mental task. Okay. But the movement of the feet, the body, the arm makes it a physical task. So here it is. When you marry together thinking and feeling, mind, body, okay, of a mental task, physical task, together as one, that allows the brain, the part of the brain that's responsible for ball mastery is called the cerebellum. It's in the back of the brain stem. It's the most active part of the brain. Regardless whether it's a mental or a physical task, it's all stored in the cerebellum in what's called the non-declared memory. It becomes implicit, like riding a bicycle or driving a car. But here's the kicker. When a child has got the mind and the body working as one, and the parent interaction in the room or in the space shared that experience, that allows the cerebellum to create what we call a chemical signature of the experience, which is emotions. Emotions are the on-off switch for learning. It's the on-off switch. So what we're literally teaching a child through ball mastery is how to pay attention. And when a child focuses their attention on what they're doing, that's where deep learning, long-term memory takes place. And the football world has never understood this. In fact, the football world hasn't caught up to what science knows already, and that is skill acquisition happens way earlier than they suppose it. So when you look at these outdated national curriculums that football federations are making, they're outdated. They put the skill acquisition phase usually between 10 and 13. They put the discovery phase between 6 and 9, and they build the characteristics of a 6 to 9 year old: clumsy, lacks motor skills, short attention span. Just play fun games related to football, and somehow they're going to start playing like Messi and Ronaldo. So the reality is that we're several steps behind in the football world. Many, and I know because I travel around the world. I'm in the boardrooms of some of the biggest football clubs that you can imagine in the world. And one of the really kind of alarming or shocking things that I found is that most people at the elite level have no idea how skill is acquired at the younger levels. So there's a disconnect. In football, I've been very lucky because I wound up in Japan. I came to a country that was a pretty weak footballing country when I arrived. And now fast forward, I've seen that transition from grassroots to national teams. So I tend to understand it better. So it's not that I'm any smarter than anybody else. Trust me. And there's many coaches that are better than I could be. But I've been able to connect the dots and understand and see where the pieces fit. I've sat in the boardroom and convinced the CEO of Volkswagen Group and their number one market in the world in China to invest in my ideas. So I've seen this ecosystem that's out there create content, been on TV. I've done over 2,000 events throughout Japan to build advocacy for technical skill training. I've been on TV for 14 years. So again, I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but it was a big eye opener for me because I started to learn there is an ecosystem out there, and great coaching is not enough. If you're trying to create a footballing country or culture, there's many different moving parts that people do not understand.
Tom, brilliant. That's you brought the science part to the development of the children through football, and that is where football makes a huge impact from a very early age, and it is through science and where these are the developments need to become part of the say every home, how you bring up the child so that not only their motor skills but
Yes.
also how their brain functions optimally from a very young age, and it's all about the emotional management.
Yes.
If the children is able to get that exposure from a very early age, they will grow optimally, and then whatever they will take up, their attention span will be much better compared to the kids who are not exposed to those similar opportunities. And that way, I think this part of science, the development, what you're working, I think need to be promoted much more through collaborative approach, going outside the football ecosystem, where
Yes.
it becomes the learning tool for the teachers in the school as well, and that way they can promote say the holistic development side of the children, and they will be able to attain much better outcome out of the time they spend with children in schools. That is what I have learned in short from you sharing the insights and your work with different scientists across the world. And I'm sure if I have the opportunity wherever, I will be promoting this from today. That's 100%.
You 100%. And you're right. I mean, there's so much more to this. First of all, football starts at home, challenges this common belief that in order to develop top football players, most of the work is done at the elite level. Now, this isn't to say that elite football isn't important. It is. But what I argue is that a lot of the hard work gets done between a child and a parent from a younger age that sets the trajectory in a very positive direction. The other thing too is that because I've worked with some of these brilliant neuroscience people, I've conducted research with professors from Harvard, Stanford, University of Houston, where we have conducted and we've studied hundreds of kids that we put through a very robust research process with fidelity built in. I mean, it fit in line with the National Institute of Health requirements, everything. And I can tell you this, we have literally made kids smarter. And what do I mean by that? We have studied a couple of hundred children in Houston, okay, where we have literally improved their test scores in mathematics and reading, and also lessened their sedentary activity, where we actually physically made them more moving around on the weekends by hooking them up to wearables. So this isn't just theory sitting and presuming. No, we've done it. We created a research project out in the western part of China in Chengdu. Three remote areas, okay? Three remote areas with 80 little 5-year-olds that we got incredible results with as well. So this is changing football. I can no longer sit in a room with 500 parents, whether those are Indian parents, Chinese parents, or whatever, and convince them to put their children in a football program, because football's great. Football's a religion. It's the number one sport in the world. But I can convince a lot of these parents to put their kid in a football program because we're going to make your kids smarter. And we've done it. We find that when children master ball mastery from these youngest ages, 3, 4, 5, what it's really doing is it's developing the ability to pay attention, to focus. So what's happening is they're learning how to learn. And the brain loves to learn while it's moving. 95% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 5 or 6. We call it neuroplasticity. The brain is constantly changing and making neural synaptic connections. So when a child learns how to focus, that's tantamount to being a superhero power, okay? Because once they learn how to learn, that spills into other disciplines. math, science, reading, whatever the discipline is. And this is the problem that we have even more so today because children are fixated on gadgets, so their attention span is very short. So aside from playing the games, they don't know how to focus their attention because the brain hasn't really learned how to learn and through ball mastery. So as you know, living in, one of the most populated countries in the world, one of the challenges that we have with Indian parents is that many of them look at football and sports as a distraction to education, so they don't want them to play sports. But now we can go on a campaign and flip it upside down. I can sit in a room with several hundred Indian families, do a presentation, okay, and show them that if you're limiting your child's participation in physical activity, you're limiting their ability to learn and do better academically. We have the science to show it. But unfortunately, the football world hasn't gotten behind this yet because they haven't understood it. I'm trying to do my part. There is some glimmer of hope because recently I was contacted by FIFA. I've done some presentations for them. AFC is coming around as well as big supporters. So I'm very optimistic for the future if we can keep this momentum going about football starting home. The amount of influence that a parent has on a child is much greater than any coach will ever have at the young ages. At the young ages. So we need to harness that and understand that attachment between a child and a parent. And what makes ball mastery, whether it's in the home or in the backyard, what brings it alive is the parents' understanding of their child's constant need for three things. Here you go. The parent's attention, the parent's approval, and the parent's praise. A child is constantly seeking that. They're not seeking it for the foreign coach out on the pitch with 20 other little 5-year-olds running around on a field. But when you've got the parent isolated with the child, it's got everything. It's got balance, agility, literacy, because the mothers and the fathers are it's such a no-brainer. But it hasn't been understood by the football world. Therefore, nobody's really kind of thought, well, maybe we're focusing a little bit too much on the coaches. And as you know, there's an obsession with coaches' education, an obsession. So what I tell people is you could bring the best coaches in the world to India. And if these kids don't have the basic building blocks of technical skill development, they can't benefit from all of these elite structures or all these great coaches that you're bringing there. If they don't have the ability to focus, learning doesn't take place. And that's not just football. You could bring the best teacher in the world to your child's classroom. If the child doesn't pay attention, learning doesn't take place. There's no deep learning. So again, this is what motivates my experience with parents. They must have something bigger in stake than just playing football. And I think that football starts at home is a massive, massive step in the right direction because it levels the playing field. Here, imagine this, and I know I'm preaching to the choir because you follow the work I've been doing, but Shaji, imagine this. You have 100 million little Indian children under the age of 6 in India. 100 million. That's like the population of Japan. Imagine 0.001% get a head start with football starting at home. Game over. But unfortunately, everybody's looking at the top end thinking, no, we need to bring the best coaches here from Europe and the best. Those are important. But that's not going to give you that giant leap forward that countries like your country is looking at. And here, it also takes care of two problems. Football starts at home mindset. It covers two things: lack of coaches and lack of facilities. That's it. You can do it all. But you need to have a more knowledgeable parents, and they need to have more than just one horse in the race to play football. I know that if Indian families, if I could, and it's so funny because I've been to your great country. I have a lot of fondness. As you know, I have some of my best friends. Richard Hood, to me, is one of the best youth development coaches in the world. Okay, I mean that honestly. You've got some great Dinesh Nair. Oh, these guys are all great guys. And so I know that I'm confident that if Indian families could understand this concept about football starting at home, you could create a revolution inside the country. And then if you can get the educators on board as well, like what we're doing, I'm involved in a big project in the Philippines right now. We've got the Department of Education. I'm doing a big project in Zambia, Africa. I was just on a call. I was just on a call with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Sport, Ministry of Education. There weren't even football people on that call. And they're interested in the program because it's got everything. It's got health, it's got education, it has family interacting, and it's got sports. And also, it's helping to develop a child's cognitive, emotional, social, physical skills. That's it. That's what Football Starts at Home does.
Ah, brilliant. We can go on to discuss this part because this is where everyone need to focus. Though people might say football is number one sport in the world and it will continue to be there, but then we need to really put the right focus at the grassroots level so that the football continue to dominate the number one position and it adds value to every part of the society, and that is where football has the potential, and that is where Tom's work is going to have huge impact, and that is where we have to see who are part of football how we can collaborate between different part of science to bring the research findings and stress on why football need to start at a very early age, not to produce players, but to see that the children gets the right development structure, not only in their body but in the ecosystem of home itself. That's very important. Now, moving forward, Tom, you have recently started working with Philippines.
Yes.
It's not a football country. It's more of a basketball country, but they are aspiring to put their football structure and compete in Asia. And they had some success with women's football, and they are also improving their national team performances in last 2 years. What is that motivates you? You being part of Philippines football now. Last 6 months, I know you are very actively engaged in the project. And what are your expectation, and what is that you think will make a huge difference to football in Philippines in the coming years because of the work the Philippines Football Federation under the leadership of John, who got elected 6 months back as the president of the Football Federation there, and his motivation and his vision to transform football in Philippines is really exciting for all of us to experience. And you've been involved now. That really motivates everyone in the ecosystem. That it definitely will lead to something bigger outcome of the initiatives they have undertaken.
Yes. So, yes, I'm involved in a really exciting program in the Philippines. Real quick background of how that happened. You referred to the new president, John Gutierrez, who became the president just a few months back or several months ago. And I received that with him, which I did. This is a guy that completely got it right away. He came to the meeting with no bias whatsoever. And after I was done with my presentation, he said to me, "When can you be in the Philippines?" And then a couple days later, he flew me there. And then I spent 3 days with him and his inner circle of executive leadership from morning to night. And then before you know it, we were signing an agreement to put up a program. And I said earlier, I said, it's much easier for me to work in a country with no football culture than it is to work in a country with the wrong football culture. So the Philippines have no football culture. So it was very easy to convince John on the pathway forward. He's a former player himself. And so John has basically placed Football Starts at Home as the official, he calls it flagship grassroots program of the entire Philippine Football Federation. So what I'm doing right now is I'm helping to build the advocacy. There are 33 regional football associations. I, together with John and a couple of his staff, we're traveling to every single one of these states, and I'm presenting them with what's the philosophy, what's the methodology, what are the beliefs, what are the intended outcomes, and this is the center of his entire election platform for what he was elected for and his mandate. And so we're going to travel to all of these areas. I'm back there again next week. I will be speaking at their National Congress at the end of the month as well, where they're bringing all of their executive committee meetings members together. And then also, when we go to visit the regional football associations, we are interacting with all of the departments of education as well. I'm sitting in high-level meetings with ministers that are basically overseeing sports, health, education, and this is the new way forward. This is the new way forward. Football starts at home. Think of it as the glue, the stickiness that allows an organization to partner with other organizations that they wouldn't normally work with. That's what we provide. I did the same thing in Houston with the MLS club, the Houston Dynamo. We had a research component. The researchers were able to tap into funding. We were able to tap into the 17 school districts. We were able to get the backing of the Houston mayor's office, from the Department of Education. Even the anti-gang squad came to us, and they wanted to be involved in our program because they looked at our program as intervention, mitigation, and prevention as well. So it ticks off everything. I even work with countries where there's tremendous health problems nowadays. Child diabetes, child obesity, child coronary disease. We're already starting to see deficits in children as early as 6 and 7, 8 years of age. So there's a lot of things that we can do, but we need to partner and be strategic. And the football world has not been good at this. If you look at a lot of the programs, they really don't have this deep connection other than, going to schools and dropping off footballs and some bibs and some goals, and then they don't come back for another year. So this is a different approach, I think, and people get it. They understand it. They see it. They value it. And then the other thing, too, is that the end users of this knowledge, who are parents, they don't pay anything. Nothing. It's free. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. So when you offer something that is free and it's valuable, you're building trust and loyalty. You're building a community of trust and loyalty. So how that interacts with the football ecosystem is that football federations and associations should be able to go to their sponsors, their brands, their media partners. They should be able to write those costs off to them. The problem with grassroots football development is that most don't understand how to devise strategies and build programs that are investable. So that's what happens. And again, they look at it more as an obligation rather than an opportunity. So they can't get the big brands to come in and basically support it because they don't know how to design it and they don't know how to implement it. So these are, just some of my few ideas that I have.
Great, great. And I wish you all the good luck and best wishes to you. I'm sure this Philippines project will be a great success. And then seeing that success, more countries in Asia will definitely join to bring this concept. And that is where I'm greatly looking forward. And whenever I meet John, we always have great conversation, and I found him, greatly motivated
Yes.
in what he's trying to do, and he took some feedback as well last time, and I'm really happy to see that leadership when they take proactive decisions, and they are really invested into transforming the game, and they engage experts like you, then there is only one direction that can reach, that is the success. And that way I think the entire Southeast Asia will be able to see the fruits of the project and your involvement in Philippines. And now you have spoken about the involvement of the brand, and from very early, your first project in Japan started with the involvement of the brand, the second project as well. Likewise, you have great experience in involving the brand, and but more often what we see is that in global football, at the grassroots level, the brands stay away, and
Yes.
they don't see the value, or they don't see that they will get into meeting the objectives of the brand or the product they are trying to market or sell. What is that you can uh, share based on your experiences, that how important is that the partnership between the football entity and the brand, and what is that the brand is going to gain out of this partnership,
Sure.
because football definitely is going to gain because they will put that investment, but more often maybe due to the lack of that, what you say, good governance, the brand might stay away. But then the important thing is that awareness, and that the, what do you say, how you structure the brand to be part of the grassroots initiatives, where those promoters, those organizations who wants to start or already doing great work at the grassroots level, they can associate the brands
Yes.
in the good work. So
Yes.
what can you suggest? What can be that mantra where they can attract the brands into
Yes.
football at the grassroots level?
Yes, that's a great question. I've been very fortunate over my career to work with literally the biggest brands in the world in football, and not just on the implementation side, but sitting in the boardroom, talking directly, convincing them, whether that's Nestle, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Volkswagen, AIA Insurance. I've worked with many of them the brands are looking, their major goal is they're looking for big numbers. They want to know how many people are going to be exposed to their brand. So it's a matter of quantity more than the quality at first in the beginning. So, for example, if I convince a Volkswagen group to go in and sponsor a series of 10 big events inside India, we need to know that when we arrive in that site, that we're going to have large numbers there. We're going to have the facility is going to be packed. It's going to be well organized. It's going to be a safe area. Uh, it's going to have governance. It's going to have the official stamp. It's going to have media partners there as well. There's a lot that goes into it, and that's the shaky part in Asia because you're not real sure what you're going to get unless there's a really strong bond. And as you just said, and I just wrote it down, whether there's a strong governance in place. So that's number one right there. That's important. Number two is what's your message and who is your message going to? In grassroots football, usually the standard sponsorship package will be some organization will want a brand to sponsor a tournament. They want a tournament because they have a guaranteed number of how many participants, usually 20 teams, 20 kids, 400 people, half of them are parents, maybe 600 people are coming to that. So that's an easy one for a brand. But what we're doing with Football Starts at Home is, first of all, it's a focus on the parents. Okay. They're the decision makers. And what we're doing is we're empowering parents to interact with their children. So we are facilitating that emotional connection between a child and their parents. But also, we're focusing on health, we're focusing on education, we're focusing on family, we're focusing on sport. So these are very, very important goals and values for brands. And also, it's scalable. So it depends on, what you're building around it. Are you building a digital platform around it? What's your message? Is this good for people? Does it have the official stamp from the federation or the professional league, or is media coming out to cover it? There's a lot of different things, but the first thing is, what's your strategy? What's your target, so that you can aim and you can figure out, okay, well, this is what we're trying to do. So I've been very fortunate over my career to be able to go into a sponsor's room or boardroom and come out with an agreement. I've almost never failed. Almost every sponsor I've ever pitched, because I know what it is that they want. So I speak that language that they want to hear. But we need, I think, more federations and associations need to understand, how do you build a grassroots platform that is investable? And I don't think a lot of them understand it.
Yes, that's very important what you said. Having a clear strategy and everything again also matters of the credibility of the organization and the objectives what they set in. That where the brands will see whether their objectives can be met through these initiatives, and that's where the brands can come for the alignment with the project, and that's where the grassroots can gain the investment from the brands. But then at the end, as you said, it is again for mutual interest how football ecosystem at the grassroots level can provide as a platform for the brands to meet their objectives. Okay, now we are almost at the last phase. Just 8 minutes to go before we end our talk. The most important part now, because I'm from India, and many Indians are kind of what you say always struggling in terms of the football landscape is not growing, though there are potential. Being far away from India, but you have also been to India. You also held several discussions in the past. But what is that you kind of experience about Indian football, where it lacks, and why it lacks, and what can be your one solution to come out of the problems what Indian football is facing, and what can be your suggestions so that people who are invested into the game in India gets motivated, and they take some of your suggestions seriously and start working on it, and that is where we will be able to see some green lights in our football landscape,
Yeah, yeah,
which is very important. And I'm sure there will be opportunities in the future for you to get involved,
sure.
and that I definitely see that, because the experiences what you have got and the experiences you are gaining every day, the expertise what you have, it's rare in the world of football, and
Yeah,
that way India, with the biggest population in the world and having the biggest potential to grow its football landscape,
yeah,
I'm sure you will be involved in before you hang up your boot in terms of off the pitch performances. I'm sure you will maybe the last and the final and the biggest project what you will do bigger than what you have done in China. I have not got the time to go into the China part. Maybe we will have that discussion
sure.
someday
Yeah,
in future. But
yeah.
then we'll be happy to hear your thoughts on Indian football.
Yeah, there's a lot to cover there for sure. I mean, being the most populous country in the world, um, there's so many different angles to go at. I would say that you know there's a lot of problems. There's been problems with the structure, the governance, the you've got a massive country, not just population, but the size of your country. It's like a continent itself. So it's very difficult to get people moving in the same direction. I do believe at least this concept of football starts at home would be a good match, because it's really going directly to the families. Here's the unfortunate thing about football. Unfortunately, football, to become very good at it, it takes a ridiculous amount of practice. It takes an early start. You're not going to develop top footballing players if they start at the older ages. And if they did, and if it was only about the coaching, then you'd be world class already, because you've experimented with bringing the best coaches to the country, and nothing's not moving the needle. Which means that you've got the. I'll tell you. Here's a good metaphor that I say. Two of them actually. Okay, so there's a story about this old factory, and one of their main machines of the engine, it just died, and nobody, all the experts came in, they tried to fix it, nobody could fix the engine. Then all of a sudden they called in this old man that someone knew that was an expert that could fix anything. He comes into the factory, he walks around the machine several times, he's got a little bag, I just happen to have my bag here, and he pulls his hammer out and he taps the machine, and all of a sudden, voila, the engine starts. So the owners they're incredibly shocked. A week later, they get the bill from the repairman, and the bill is $10,000. So they're thinking, what could have possibly cost $10,000? So they send him a letter asking him to break it down. He writes them back. He says, well, out of the $10,000, it was $2, okay, for the hammer, and it was $9,998 knowing where to hit the hammer. So I'm telling India right now where to hit the hammer. Hit the hammer with the families of the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. And here it is. Here it is. Ready? Develop an army of little 5 and 6-year-old boys and girls that are skilled at ball mastery. That's it. And then the old get out of the way, just let them play will actually work. And that's my advice to India. That's it.
No, no, absolutely. You're spot on when you say that hit the hammer at the at the right spot to get the best outcome. Is the engine is where the problems are. When the engine is not functioning and not functioning optimally, or it's the horsepower is far below, and there are multiple issues. You start and then you don't move. Maybe you're moving, but then against the engine stops. And you have put the right analogy there on Indian football. It's really what to say. I have no words to thank you for the time you have spared today to share your experiences, your expertise, and it was for me a real enriching experience. And I'm sure those listeners who will continue to go through this conversation will get abundant of knowledge, experiences, and insights, and that would definitely help not only develop the game in the right way, but then they will get motivated to invest in the right way, so that they get the right knowledge, and that's how they can influence the growth of football where whichever geography they are. I wish Tom all the good luck with all the projects you are doing across the globe, and it was great having you today, and it's absolutely a great pleasure. Thanks, absolutely, from the core of my heart, I would like to thank you for sparing this time and sharing all that insights, which is a very rare expert can like you. Tom, all the best and the good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye.